Another Silica video. So I am with the man himself, DRAM the man, the dev, the big man behind Silica.
Hello, everyone.
He is going to be going through with me the update 0.8.76. Does that been changed now? It hasn't the hot fix would have changed that. Am I right?
Yeah, it's 0.78, but you can.
Yeah, this is the patch notes.
It's a hot fix. It's a hot fix. So.
Yeah. So
there'll be another hot fix.
Yeah, so the number's going to change again, but we are going to be going over the patch notes for this particular update. The hotfix, what I'll do is I'll link it in the video down below, so you can have a look at the current hotfixes that have come out as well. So, that being said, DRAM, if you want to do the talking head man for the... I caught you drinking. for the...
It's honestly just vitamins in water. Basically. Oh, yes.
Healthy DRAM.
Healthy DRAM. Well, alrighty, so... Where are we? Okay. So... I mean, do you want me to say that thing? Like, read it out loud?
Yes.
There's no quote this time, unfortunately. Alright, greetings everyone. We have just released an update focusing almost exclusively on multiplayer networking, both in terms of stability and scalability. We have moved from the old Steam Networking API to the new Steam Networking Sockets API. This was a massive change, requiring a significant time investment, requiring the AI overhaul to be put on hold. With this done, AI takes the top priority of the list again, so expect to see big improvements in this regard very soon. Additionally, numerous performance optimizations have also made it in, further improving frame rate. In any case, a list of changes is detailed below. Again, thank you for your support and especially your patience. Silica is a complex work of passion that takes a ton of work to polish, and we are all looking forward to the day we release a perfected 1.0. Take care and see you on the surface.
There we go. The lovely DRAM reading out the little tiny little mini explainer of what's going on behind the scenes and going into the update. So, without further ado, we have got ourselves some gameplay changes added. Aim compensation for siege tank and armed transport.
Right, so that's basically the siege tank. It's a little bit further down written as well, like that a change siege tank projectile now has ballistic arc. So just so it makes sense why there's aim compensation on the siege tank. So previously the siege tank fired straight. Now its shot goes in an arc. This is obviously relevant to the armed transport as well, which is a grenade launcher, which also fires in an arc. And so to make it easier to aim with, so you don't have to aim kind of like above the target to do the compensation yourself, you just aim at the target where you want it to hit, and it automatically compensates. So the turret will aim higher to automatically hit the location you want to hit. It's not 100% perfect, that's fine, because it also depends on what kind of angle you're at, but it works well.
Cool. And that's for the armed transport as well, so the grenade launcher?
Yeah, exactly. It's general support for, vehicle turrets. And it's utilized on these two, because these are the only ones which kind of need that kind of compensation.
Yeah, be fair. Added chat, team chat, and server chat console commands.
Yes. So right now, obviously, to chat, you would be a player, press enter, or whichever, if you rebind it, and then obviously type in switching to team chat or whatever. You can do it now through the console. It's not particularly useful, apart from unless someone wanted to do some mod which kind of did some hotkeys for chatting, something standard or whatnot, right? I just thought because I specifically wanted to add server chat, right? Server chat is essentially chat, but for the server. So you have to be either the host or a root admin to be able to use server chat, and that indicates it's just basically a standard chat, except it's indicated that it's from the server, right? So you can use this for public announcements or some things I did it so that data bomb could use it for the mods there because right now it always kind of said the first player in the list is always saying the things. So now it'll just be the ideally data bomb will use that, and it will just say server and whatnot. And if you use chat and team chat, it's it's self-explanatory. So because I added one, I thought might as well just add it for the other two as well, right?
Yeah. No, that's fair. Right. Structure rally points. Yes. Yes.
Yes, that one's an important
Yes.
one. So obviously, I mean, it's self-explanatory. But for anyone who is not familiar with RTSs, just in case, structure rally points is, in an RTS you select your structure, and when you build some units, they move to one spot, right? A rally point is simply that spot, right? So you can move the spot to wherever you need to. So you can put it at the enemy base, for example. So you just build units, and they'll automatically kind of like go to the enemy base. It's obviously very useful. It's obviously an industry standard for RTSs. So it was necessary to add in. That was actually added by Vojta, and then just there was one little bug, and I fixed it up. So because he needed it for the game mode he's working on.
Yes. Yes. we know from last week what game mode that was going to be.
Yes,
It was
I
hidden
know.
away. It was
It was hidden
located.
away. But now it's properly hidden. It's just mainly so people don't accidentally start and it's broken.
Yeah. Okay. So I won't disclose what it is. I won't disclose what it is. Not yet. So you
Well,
either have to watch back last week to find out what it was, or you just won't know.
I'm hoping to add it like into a preview form this week, ideally, but
Ooh.
worst
Okay.
case next week.
Okay. You have to
Mr.
you have to let me
Lewis.
know. You have to
Hello,
let me know.
Mr. Lewis.
I'll be jumping straight into that. Changed. Siege tank projectile now has a ballistic arc.
Yeah, so I mentioned that just previously. So basically, previously the siege tank, when you fired straight, or like when you fired at something, it just flew exactly straight, didn't
Hmm.
deviate. It was much more interesting. Like we did a dev, or I did a dev talk before. There's a channel on the Silica Discord where it's basically, I hop in once in a while, and those usually go for like 7, 8, 9 hours, however long it is. And yeah, we did a bunch of stuff, experimented with mist and all this other kind of stuff. But most importantly, and this was the interesting thing, people suggested, oh, let's try a ballistic arc with the siege tank projectile, and it felt more correct. It felt more interesting, and that's why it's in, because it
Hmm.
felt like it has much more mass, and it makes sense the explosion it does.
Yeah,
So
and I
that's
was I was having a bit of fun last week with it, taking out rail
yeah.
tanks from the top of a cliff, just trying to get shots on point. It was pretty fun. It was pretty fun to use. Squid may now use both speed boost attack and explode attack at the same time.
This again came out of that dev talk, where we were experimenting with it, and yeah, it made most sense to be able to kind of like boost attack and use the explode attack at the same time,
Hmm.
because you might want to like quickly catch up to an aircraft and at the same time try and explode on him.
Yeah.
So that's it basically. Yeah.
Cool. Cool. Fixed. Crab. Stop. Start. Stop motion on lower FPS.
Yes. So when there was low frame rate, and
Hmm.
it wasn't managing the pathfinding calls, what would happen is that the crowd would kind of like stop, start, stop, start, stop, start, and it was extremely annoying.
Mm.
And so that's significantly improved. It still happens very little. It can be a little bit annoying, and I'll be still working on that, because right now, like the especially the crab, or like the aliens, because they can walk on walls and everything, they don't need to absolutely precisely follow the path. Right, that doesn't
Yeah.
mean they'll be like 20 meters away. But right now, what can happen is if they pass the point that they're meant to get to, because they move very fast and the AI is evaluated not as fast like the actual path, um, then what can happen is they start to kind of like curve towards it, or stop on it, and then of course they get the next waypoint and whatnot. So this is something that I'll be tweaking. Again, this falls under AI. So I want to, by the end of this week, this coming week, I want to have like the AI in a much better state, like the general AI, right? I've already. Well, I won't go into too many details here, but basically that's the thing we're talking about. Improvement to the movement of the crabs, the AI crabs specifically, and it was mostly a problem on lower FPS because then the AI wasn't managing to update in time.
Mm. Okay, now we're going over to the multiplayer stuff. So, added. Sending packets through lanes, separating reliable and unreliable.
Okay, so reliable packets historically have been through TCP protocol, and unreliable through UDP. So UDP is you kind of send that shit away and it ends up wherever it ends up. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. That's why it's called unreliable. That's why
Hmm.
it's the terminology for it is unreliable. Reliable is a handshake-based system. So I'll send you a packet, you receive it, and then you send me a response. Hey, I've received your packet. Whereas obviously much slower than the thing, because you have to, because sometimes you'll send it once, and if you don't get a response within, let's say, a certain amount of time, you'll just send it again. So it's obviously heavier on the network, but it's important that it's reliable. It's used for specific things like, okay, spawn a unit, and the thing was, it was all through one lane. That just means that the bandwidth was all put into like this one, or you could say, we'll just call it's literally just called lane there for simplicity. But imagine cars. Each of them is a packet, and they're all trying to go down one highway. Yeah, they have to go behind each other. By having separate lanes, you'll obviously have the one going for the unreliable ones and one for the reliable ones. And the important thing is you can prioritize them. So if the first lane is starting to run out of bandwidth, the second one will just send very little. Yeah. So that's an important thing there. So it's just basically first of all, it improves performance a little bit, like network performance. It's not actual gameplay performance, but just that doesn't have to eat so much bandwidth.
Yeah.
And it prevents the kind of like thing where it would really quickly run out of space and then just wouldn't send anything.
Yeah. Yeah, and I kind of understand what you mean. It's kind of like there's another terminology to it, like water pipes.
Yeah,
you're
you could say
funneling
so.
one pipe of water, but you're trying to push too much down it, so you then split it off into say two pipes of water, and then it kind of like helps even out the flow. So yeah,
Exactly.
kind of similar to that in a way. Okay. Server advertised only once fully
Oh, you
loaded.
missed the one previous.
I did. Overhaul Steam networking layer to use a Steam networking socket. So this is quite a big one.
Yeah, this isn't a massive one. It's just a one line changed, but the reality of it is that took a month and a half of a lot of work. Basically, it's well, I mean, one thing which I went through was, so just to clarify, the old Steam networking API, right, application programming interface. The previous one was, it worked pretty well, but it had its own limitations. The advantage was it used true UDP, right, for like the unreliable packets. So it started dropping them when it handled some things better than the new one, I think. But the new one allows you to set it up much more.
Yeah.
But that's a separate thing. But the problem was that was actually deprecated back in 2021, I believe, or 2020. But I didn't know about it, obviously, because I was using it since 2018. And like, I'd say about a good third at minimum, more like over half of games on Steam, like that use the Steam networking systems, they use this old API, and eventually they will stop working in multiplayer because it's being overhauled, like it's being deprecated. It's already deprecated, and eventually it just will stop working entirely. So they recommend obviously moving to the Steam networking sockets, which is their new API, and that just is a new system of like how to send sockets and send packets of information, and handling connections and all this kind of stuff. It is good, but oh my god, there's no example of how to use it, so it was torturous to kind of like work out how it functions. But yeah, we worked that out in the end, so it works. Still has like some issues that I need to deal with. Some of them are like the previous system handled, in my opinion, better when there was too much, especially the unreliable packets. It just makes no sense to have them on the same system, because it's like, I don't mean like obviously the networking sockets, of course, but it doesn't make sense to have them like in the same queue. It's just, but anyway, yeah.
Yeah, and
So
we were seeing some. You mentioned last week, like you could actually see, like there were some issues going on with the older API, like they're trying to phase it out, so they're creating issues with it.
yeah, basically it worked perfectly fine before the start of this year. And around May, suddenly people, especially Lewis, was telling me, and even the app man from like the from the development team, suddenly he could no longer like he'd play, and then he'd suddenly get into this point where it looked like one of the reliable packets was not delivered. And that's, of course, a massive problem. If a reliable packet is not delivered, it could be something like, what the one packet is, spawn this object, and the next packet is initialize these values on the object, and let's say some further information, right? It really depends of what needs to be done. But obviously, you cannot receive those out of order, so it's important that they arrive on like in order. And if one of them is dropped, it basically just stops the system, because it's waiting for the one that needs to put there. So if one of them is dropped and it keeps getting the next ones, doesn't matter how many it gets, it still needs to. It's waiting for that one because it needs to process it in order. And I don't have it confirmed, but it's the most logical thing that happened, that a reliable packet was dropped in the system. I don't know how that was possible because it never happened before. And so it entirely broke the system. And basically, lo and behold, people of course are starting to get like 20, 30 second delays, sometimes even 2 minutes, and then they suddenly catch up. And so yeah, so that was obviously quite painful. But and then it would just completely break their game sometimes and whatnot. So obviously thanks to that was like a kind of like a wake up call. Okay, what's wrong? I had a look at the API and saw it was now deprecated. I was like, oh crap! All right. So that's when I started looking into some systems, tried Steam networking messages, implemented that completely because it was API. It worked almost the same way, or like the usage of it was the same as the old networking API. So it's a nice, easy fix. Got that working nicely, and then I found out that it does not work on servers because it's literally only it needed the Steam client. So I was like, great, so that's not a usable solution. So I had to completely remove that, and yeah, implemented the Steam networking sockets. So very painful, but we're here now, so at least that.
It's all sorted. If you keep seeing me looking behind me, it's because, in typical cat manner, the whole day he's not bothered me. As soon as I start doing something, he's in here begging for food and climbing up things and just starting to. Yeah, he's staring at me. So yeah, that's why I'm looking behind me, because my cat is literally being a douche behind me. So yeah, cat life. Where was we?
So we are fixed server advertised only once fully loaded.
Yes.
Right. So what was happening sometimes was that people would, you'd start the server up, and people would join the server immediately because as soon as it was it said, okay, connected to Steam, open the lobby or whatever. I stopped using lobbies, but it advertised it through immediately advertised it through Steam, so you could just click join. But the problem was that the server was still loading, and what that could cause is that you'd join, but it would then load the map and it would just break. Essentially, long story short. So you were kind of in this kind of connecting state, and you could no longer reconnect. So it literally was just a simple fix. I fixed that, by the way, because that's the next point. But yeah, I just simply, and there's no point trying to connect to the server when it's not fully loaded, because you'll try and connect to it and it won't respond. And so you'll be like, okay, the server's not responsive because it's loading at the next level. So yeah, that was a simple fix for that one. So I just, once the server is fully loaded, I mean, even the level and all this kind of stuff, then it advertises itself on Steam.
Okay.
That just advertises just means it's in the server list.
Okay. Cool. And this kind of leaks into this one. Yeah, trying to connect while loading could not result in it being able to join again.
Yeah, exactly. So it's exactly that. I mean, two fixes for the one thing. One's a fix, an actual fix, and the second one is just making sure it's just a logical one.
Fixed. Net update packets were being sent as reliable. Should be unreliable.
Yes. So this was a bug I encountered, and honestly, this could have actually been one of the things that was messing up even the previous API. So I could probably maybe go back and continue to use it. But the problem is, it's going to be deprecated and removed, so there's no point even going back. But I found out somehow, I don't even know when, someone, probably me, accidentally, I guess, replaced how the packet was being sent, like the unreliable ones. So unreliable packets, what I use them for example, is just unit positions, right? Because you're constantly updating that, right? Because they're physics based and they move around. So you're just constantly sending to the clients, okay, this is the position, this is the position, this is the position, position, rotation, velocity, and angular velocity. These are the four things you have to always synchronize to keep the units moving correctly. And they were accidentally being sent as reliable, and I assume that would be what maybe even broke the previous like causing the issue, because one of those packets might have been just like, okay, you're sending too much information, it wasn't delivered, and it just completely broke. Now it's just a theory. There's no point in going back to test it, because there's no going back to the old system anyway.
Yeah. Especially when it's going in the end anyway. There's no point in going back when you've already made work on the new one.
Exactly.
Messages remained in the read buffer, allowing them to build up.
Yeah, that was just a minor thing where what I forgot to do, and this was related to going to the new networking sockets, but because it was one of the updates. I mean, quite frankly, given like from the main branch update perspective, that fixed message shouldn't even be there. That's a bug, because it was related to, because I put into the beta branch the Steam networking sockets. People tried it, then there was some error, the issues that occurred. So then I fixed it, and what it was that I wasn't reading the messages fast enough. So just building up in the back, and they just killed the game basically. So I fixed that, and so yeah, that message shouldn't even be there, because it's not applicable to the main branch. It's only applicable to beta.
Okay. When connection is ended, but not informed, disconnect client server if sending a packet returns no connection.
Yeah, so this was, and it still happens. This is annoying. I'll have to find out how the hell it can happen. But basically, there's a kind of like a connection thing, right? A connection. We'll just call it a connection. And when one side ends it, both sides like get this kind of like callback that they kind of inform the code, so to speak, that the connection has been ended. And what was happening was that if the client killed their game, it would not send it would end the connection abruptly, and it wouldn't be able to actually send the information to the server, and the server would then get would try and send a packet, but would find that the connection is dead, and it would get into this infinite loop of trying to send it. So there's just a fix for that. It was super simple, so okay, if there's no connection, remove that client. I'm gonna have to actually try and fix this differently, because I've noticed it can occasionally happen where people get just suddenly disconnected, and I have no idea why, like zero idea why, because the Steam networking socket is just a black box. So I'll have to find out how that can happen. So it's going to be painful debugging, but yeah, but it happens. It happened like twice to Vietman, like last week when we were playing. He just suddenly got disconnected twice, and it's like great. So I'll have to find out why that happens.
Okay.
But
okay.
So it's fixed, but can still happen in an extremely rare situation, and still people can get accidentally disconnected. So I'll find out why.
Okay. So, controls. Fixed. Input stuttering from noisy devices.
So this was what Dodad was fixing. It's from memory. It was when like some input devices, were kind of like, if you think of the value coming in, it was like just jumping all over the place. It would cause like this weird input stuttering. So he kind of like smoothed that out, basically.
So what would class as a noisy device then? Would it be anything from mice to headsets?
Oh, like a joystick. A joystick, for example, where it's let's say an old joystick which you've used way too much, and the kind of the input, even just when standing still, it kind of like jumps back and forth because the actual potentiometer is kind of like already worn out. That's a situation where that can happen.
So like stick drift, where it's constantly inputting, and it's just
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Fixed command and unit selection window not cleared upon open menu. I think I actually encountered that a few times myself.
Yeah, I don't remember this one. Again, this is by Dodad. But yeah, the commander unit selection window was not cleared on open menu. I assume that means when you open the menu, and if you had some unit selection, like units selected, that menu did not disappear. I assume that's what that is.
Yeah, I think I counted it a few times where like you're in the commander selection menu, and then I don't know if it's the same thing, but pressing escape, going into options and stuff, but you're still able to click behind it onto the selection menu because it's still showing up as an overlay. Yeah. I've noticed that a few times when I was trying to play. But yeah, cool. Performance. Optimized creature turret. Line of sight, check. Uses batched raycasts.
Okay,
it's line of sight.
Yeah, and it's the next one's the same thing, basically, the soldier line of sight checks. Okay. So the line of sight checks are obviously just basically do a raycast from one from, let's say, the soldier to a creature or another target, to see if it's in line of sight. Now, obviously, if it's like in a single thread, it means you have to do one after the other. But if it's multi-threaded, you can do multiple at once and then just get the results. Obviously, there's a slight performance loss with a tiny amount of units, but obviously once you scale that up, it's actually a performance gain, obviously, massive one, because multi-threaded. Yeah. So that's basically it, and just means that batched raycast means that you send them off for the various threads to kind of like utilize it.
Yeah.
To do that and give back the results.
Okay, so we're going to skip over the fact the soldier one's the same thing, so they both come in the same category. So we're going to be jumping over to AI pathfinding calls spread out over time.
Okay, so this one's related to it's a bit of an optimization on my end where when units kind of if they were getting a ton of orders at once, or if you selected, let's say, 1,000 units, and you all told them all to move somewhere, what would happen is that there'd be a massive amount of pathfinding calls in one go, right? All of the units, they would first calculate long-range pathfinding, and then they would calculate short-range pathfinding. So obviously, you can imagine that that's a massive load on the system, and literally all that happens is it has a maximum, I think, of 9 or 10 threads that it's using for pathfinding. So it just would put them into the queue mainly, but to also help with the multiplayer implication of this, as well as the performance one. Uh, for example, if you told one unit 4 times in a row, like within, let's say, 100 milliseconds or whatever, to move to a position, that would be 8 pathfinding calls in total. And it's pointless if you can just wait those 100 milliseconds and then perform the actual check. So what I do is I perform a maximum of 50 pathfinding calls per, I think it was like per 200 milliseconds or something like that. It's barely noticeable, basically. And it just means that if you give 1,000 units, instructions to move, it will take a couple of seconds to do, or like a second or two, or a bit more than that. I forget exactly how it is. But it will take a little bit longer to actually perform those calls, and the reason is to ensure performance, in this. And also, and this is another thing, is when a pathfinding call is complete, it'll actually send the long range path specifically. It will send that information to all the clients. So I have to optimize that a little bit more, so it doesn't send it to all clients unnecessarily, but it should only send it to commander clients. But the whole thing is that obviously, if you're a commander, you need to get that so you can see the line visualized where the unit will go, and it's it's a lot of data which has to be sent if it's many units. That's usually what breaks the game in multiplayer right now. Where if, let's say, someone switches out, if all 3 commanders switch out of out of commanders, then AI takes over. Suddenly, it's a massive amount of pathfinding calls.
Yeah.
And that means a lot of data somebody needs to send. So I can literally cut that down significantly. So that's what, in fact, I don't have it in the list, Jesus Christ, for tomorrow, because that was one thing I wanted to look at tomorrow. But yeah, so that's that one.
Okay. Optimize damage synchronization.
If not needed. All right, wrote that down. Optimize damage synchronization. All right, so that's another thing. If AI are shooting at each other, what will happen is for every bullet hit, that needs to be sent from the server to the clients, right? The information. And what it would always send was the local position. It would send the like the damage type, the damage, and it will also send which collider it hit, so just an index, and it will also send which local position relative to that collider it hit. Right? It's quite a lot of information, and this is still sent from the client to the server, right? Because it's really important to evaluate if a player is not cheating. But for the server to sending it to all the clients, it was just needless. Not only that, but if you had, let's say, 100 bullets hitting one tank, it was a massive amount of packets that were being sent out, right? So what I did there was, if it's a player shot, and if it was shot by a player or a player was hit, then that's sent off immediately, right?
Okay.
I reduced it also just to a not even the damage type, that's not even important, but just the damage itself, and also which direction, and it's just one of 8 directions it can come from, because I only use that for animation, right? So like, if you get hit from the right hand side, you'd be like, oh, kind of thing. So that's where this is used.
Okay.
And what I do is, if it's for example just AI hitting AI, then instead of sending it immediately, what I do, I put that unit into a list that it needs to have its health synchronized to the clients, because if it gets 100 hits in like 1/10 of a second, you don't need to send 100 packets, right? Because you just need to send, okay, we need to synchronize the health value. And yeah, that's what I do. And it massively reduced the amount of network traffic that needed to be sent in heavy battles. Yeah, obviously, if there's no one shooting, no difference.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Optimized. Use whole group for client connections on server for faster reading.
Okay, so this one's a tiny one. It's a very technical one. It's related to the new API. So previously, what I was doing was, I would using the new API, or even with the old one, I would say, I would look at each client individually. I would say, hey, what information do you have there? Like what messages have you sent to me? And you go through the messages, process them. The next client, get the messages and process them. Then the next client, and all this. What happens with the poll group is it just, as it gets the messages, it kind of just puts them into one buffer that you read, instead of like 5 or 6, or one buffer per player. It puts it into one message buffer, and it's just more performant, basically. No change to functionality, just performance.
Yeah. Okay. Optimized network traffic based on load for damage and pathfinding paths.
Okay, so this is related to the previous ones, the ones that are above, the AI pathfinding call spread out over time and damage synchronization.
Yes.
So if there's a heavy load on network traffic, then what will happen is that that damage synchronization will be sent even slower, right? So if you see AI fighting between each other, you'll just get the information much slower. This is relevant mainly for the commander, but or if you're watching as a player another unit, you see it getting hits, but then the information arrives much slower that it actually took the damage. That's fine. You're mainly concerned with yourself or your target. And the pathfinding information, again, it's relevant to the commander, but from a commander's perspective, you don't need it in a hundredth of a second. Like within half a second is enough. So it's just spread out to be more efficient if there's heavy network load.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Unreliable packets not sent for a while if the send buffer is full.
Yeah, this is kind of like oh shit, we've completely filled the buffer for sending messages. So what I do is this mainly happens if there's like a ton of stuff happening at once, right? Where suddenly you'll get that message that, oh, cannot send anything, the buffer is full. So what I do there is then I just kind of just internally indicate that, okay, we're not going to send unreliable packets for a little while. That means the positions of units will not be sent for a while to the clients, right? Which is fine, because if you get into that kind of situation, it's a heavy battle and you're not even going to notice, realistically speaking, right? It's mainly like, okay, things are really hitting the fan. The system just cannot keep up, so we just have to let it catch up. Yeah, and that's what I do. It's a kind of like it's more of a backup option, but in most cases it's not actually like utilized.
Okay. Okay. Optimized. Projectiles multi-threading.
Okay, so this one's a big one. This one is again relevant only in heavy battles. It's completely irrelevant in small engagements. But in heavy battles, when there's a lot of projectiles flying everywhere, obviously if it's single threaded, that means you calculate obviously everything on the one thread. Like again, we're talking about array casts, right? So because the bullet in one frame will move from here to here, let's say, obviously much further, but you get the point. Then you have to evaluate what's in the middle if it hits something or whatever. And these, of course, this was done on one thread previously, so it's multi-threaded now. Obviously, I think that kind of like implies in itself how much of a performance boost that can be. And most importantly is the next point, right? And I'll let you get to that one.
Soldiers and aliens no longer use animated colliders using a customized algorithm.
Yes, so this one specifically brings the biggest performance improvement in heavy battles. Yeah, not in small engagements. In fact, these two we obviously slightly slow it down, but very slightly in light engagements. So obviously it's not visible in normally. But anyway, the obviously each character, for example, had to have a collider for the arm, a collider for the forearm, and so on. And these colliders, obviously, as it's moving, are updated in the physics system, their position. So when you do a raycast, you can correctly kind of gauge if you've hit the arm or the head or the, whatever, body and whatnot. And this actually, like when these were enabled, it literally cut the FPS into half. Yeah.
Okay.
So what I did, I had a different system there, which was like a damage grid system, where the units, as they were moving around, they would register themselves into this damage grid. So they'd be in like the cells they kind of occupy, and they would switch off these colliders. So when there was a bullet that was being fired, and it's like, okay, I'm flying from here to here, it would get the grid grids it would fly through and tell everything in those grids to activate their colliders. Now, if you got a heavy firefight with bullets flying everywhere, that means that these were active for a long time, which meant that obviously you'd get low FPS. So what was done was, and this was not done by me, this was done by the external studio, Flying Rat. Basically what they did is they read the information of the colliders and store that information somewhere else. And they don't need the colliders at all, because we literally use it just for collision, for projectile hit detection, right, and explosion detection, and they wrote their own algorithm for calculating, intersection of a capsule, because that's what we use for it, and yeah, so it just means that instead of actually having the information there all the time and available for anything else, which it's never used for, then it's just you only actually calculate the information when you need it, right? So fake colliders, you could call it fake colliders, and they're not actually in the scene, but they're derived from what was in the scene.
Okay. Right, so that is the end of the optimization part of the patch notes. We're just going to be jumping over to balance. Now, most of this is quite self-explanatory, but I think latch force, if we can get a little explanation on that in a moment. But I'll go through each one first, and then we'll get into latch force in a second. So, squid explosion damage changed from 2,500 to 3,500. Dragonfly health from 200 to 300. Speed from 35 to 45. Latch force from 3.5 to 5. Wasp health from 200 to 300. Latch force from 3.5 to 5. And the fighter magazine size gone down from 100 to 40. So, latch force.
Sorry?
So,
excuse me?
That's right. Latch force. I assume that's when a dragonfly or a wasp goes to attach to something. I assume that's the latch force.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The latch on force. It's also for crabs, right? So if you, for example, with a crab, you jump on top of a tank or onto anything, because it's all physics based, then it's the acceleration it can apply to change its velocity, right? So that means if, for example, a crab jumps onto a tank, if that tank was, let's say, really fast moving and just kept changing its position, then there's a maximum amount of force that the crab can use to remain stuck to the tank, because you want to have creatures be able to slide off, right? And that's latch on force. Before it was too weak, so what would happen is it was mainly relevant to what's it called, to gunship and fighter, where they'd start accelerating. You kind of like latch onto them, but then you'd slip off because the latch force wasn't high enough. So I just increased it to obviously kind of compensate that, because if you have it too much, then you can never shake them off, and this is not entirely desired, because you want to be able to shake them off. For example, if you crash into a wall, it's a kind of like a bit of a tactic, but you can obviously you take a bit of health damage, but you shake off the wasps, for example.
Yeah. Okay.
Or if there was an explosion nearby, it would normally throw them off.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's fair. Right. So that is the patch notes. Thank you, Dram, for going through the explanations and coming through the notes with me again, as usual. Guys, if you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button. Every Sunday, without fail, it's Silica Sundays. Well, I say every Sunday without fail, but occasionally we do the Saturday. But that's only because of other things that could crop up at any point. But every weekend, all right? Silica on a weekend. Every weekend. It's been like it since the release of the game.
Yes.
And for the foreseeable future, it's not stopping. It's not stopping. So, without further ado, guys, I will see you in the next one, and I'll see you on the Silica Sunday/Saturdays, depending on when it is. Peace out. See you soon.
Subscribe to like him.